Tonight we'll drift through 6 simple dishes, each one a quiet comfort from a kitchen past. Some came from seaside cafes, others from humble staff rooms or early morning bakeries, but all of them in their own way are soft steps toward rest. So settle in, breathe deeply, and let the warmth of familiar flavors guide you gently towards sleep. The first recipe tonight is eggs on toast with pan-fried cherry tomatoes. There was a stretch of my early kitchen years where the days bled into one another, shifts that began before sunrise and ended long after midnight. The kind of tired that settles in your bones, where even your dreams smell like stock pots and scorched pans. I remember one winter night in particular, 16 hours on my feet, fingers nicked, eyes stinging from the heat lamp. I didn't want to talk, or think, or even sit. I just wanted something warm, something simple, something true. I opened the fridge in my flat, not expecting much. A half-dozen eggs, a handful of cherry tomatoes, wrinkled, but still bright. Bread that was almost toast already. It was enough. I started with the tomatoes, no oil yet, just a dry pan, heat rising slowly. They sat there still and silent, until the skins began to split and blister. That's when I added the olive oil, a little, just enough to make them sigh, a crack of salt, and they softened like they'd been holding their breath all day. The bread went in next, 2 slices from the middle of the loaf. I toasted them in the same pan, pushing them through the tomato oil, like dragging fabric through dye. They came out golden at the edges, with a hint of red where the juice had kissed them. Then the eggs, cracked straight into the same pan, the yolks intact, the whites curling softly at the edge. I kept the heat low. There's no need for rush at the end of the day, just a bit of salt, maybe a flick of pepper, if I had it nearby. I plated it with 1 slice under each egg. The tomatoes tumbled to the side, warm and bursting. No parsley, no shaved truffle, no tricks, just food that knew what you needed. I sat on the floor of my tiny kitchen, back against the cupboard. The plate rested on a folded towel. I ate slowly, the yolk running down the toast, the tomatoes sweet and sharp on the tongue. It didn't fix everything, but it didn't need to. It made space. It softened the edges. That's the thing about tired food. It doesn't need to impress. It just needs to hold you without asking questions. And in that moment, with blistered tomatoes and soft eggs and toast soaked in silence, I felt a kind of comfort I've chased ever since. So if the day has taken more than it gave, and your hands ache and your thoughts are heavy, make this. Don't dress it up. Don't think too hard. Just cook with kindness. Eat warm. Sleep well. Good night. That was recipe 1. The second recipe tonight is pasta with butter, garlic, and a bit of grated cheese. In Italy they call it pasta in bianco, white pasta. Not for the color, but the quiet. A dish that doesn't show off. No red sauce, no meat, no herbs towering on top. Just noodles, butter, garlic, and a bit of cheese. The kind of meal that doesn't need to explain itself, because it was never trying to impress in the first place. I learned to make it during a short but formative stage in Emilia-Romagna, from a dishwasher who'd been in the kitchen longer than most of the chefs. His hands were weathered from hot pans and scalding water, but his movements were light, assured. When your words get tired, he said, let garlic speak for you. We'd stay late sometimes, well past the cleaning, when the clang of service gave way to the hum of fridges and the occasional drip from the faucet. And he'd make this pasta in bianco, not as a gesture, just as a kind of return. He always started with water, generous salt, a pot large enough to let the pasta move. It should taste like the sea, he said. He didn't wait for a boil with impatience. He leaned on the counter, peeled a garlic clove slowly, flattening it with the side of a knife. Not minced, never minced, crushed just enough to speak its flavor without shouting it. In a small pan, ideally copper-bottomed, he'd melt a knob of butter. Not a tablespoon, not a measure, just enough to coat the bottom, to turn the garlic gold, but never brown. Burnt garlic is bitterness, he warned once. So he watched it, tended to it like a candle. The pasta, usually spaghetti or linguine, went in once the water danced. No broken strands. He let them bend naturally into the heat. He reserved a cup of the starchy water, always. The best sauce, he'd say, is half memory, half water. Once al dente, he'd lift the pasta out and into the garlic butter with tongs, never draining it completely. The starch came with it, thickening the butter into a kind of glaze. That's when he added a touch more butter, swirling it in, and a shower of finely grated cheese. Parmigiano Reggiano, if available, pecorino in a pinch. He didn't toss aggressively, he coaxed the strands, letting them shine. No pepper, unless the night had edge to it. No garnish, unless he felt particularly generous. Then he'd plate it, just a mound, never stacked into a warm bowl. We ate it standing, backs to the stove, the whole kitchen quiet as the garlic settled on the tongue. The pasta was soft but with life, coated but not heavy, warm but not cloying. It was food for the hour, after words run dry. For when comfort doesn't come from speaking, but from being understood, without needing to speak at all. I make it now, when I need something uncomplicated. When the day has been too loud, or the silence feels wide. I crush garlic slowly, swirl butter patiently, taste for salt, not seasoning. And every time, I let the dish say what I can't. Here now, rest, good night. That was recipe 2, good night. The third recipe tonight is tinned tomato soup with a splash of cream and buttered bread. There are nights in the kitchen world where you give every last bit of yourself to other people's plates. You finish service hollow, salt-stained, and standing in the quiet that follows the storm, too tired to make anything from scratch, but too proud to settle for nothing. That's when I turn to the tin. Tomato soup, store-bought, familiar, dependable. The kind that gets dismissed, but always lingers in the back of the cupboard, waiting. I'd pour it into a small saucepan, the metal clink of the spoon on the can's rim the only sound in the flat. The stove burner clicked on with a low whoosh, and I'd let the soup warm slowly, no rush. After service, there's never any need for urgency, only recovery. As it warmed, I'd add a splash of cream, not measured, just a small pour from the carton, enough to pale the red and soften the edge. A few turns of the pepper mill, fresh and sharp, and sometimes a small knob of butter dropped right in to melt and swirl through. Beside it, bread, thick slices if I had them, heel ends if I didn't, into the toaster or a hot pan with a slick of butter, until the crust went golden and the kitchen filled with a kind of smell that reminded me someone, somewhere, used to cook for me too. I wouldn't serve it in a bowl. I'd choose a wide mug, something with weight, something you could wrap both hands around, the kind of vessel that holds more than soup. I'd sit in the corner of my flat, lights low, knees pulled up, dip the toast in, one edge at a time, let it go, soft. Let the warmth settle into my chest. I wasn't reinventing anything. I wasn't plating for stars or critics. I was just feeding myself something that felt like care. People forget that not all comfort comes from scratch. Sometimes it comes from knowing how to rescue something simple. How to make a tin of soup feel like a kindness. How to add one or two things, just enough to say, I still matter tonight. So if all you have is a can and a quiet kitchen, don't dismiss it. Add cream, add pepper, toast the bread and butter it, like you mean it. Then sit, sip slowly, let it remind you you did enough today. Good night. That was recipe 3. The fourth recipe tonight is pan-fried white fish with lemon and peas. I was young, too proud, too sharp-edged, and deep into my trial weeks at Le Gavroche. One night, I got into a shouting match with the head chef. I don't remember who started it, but I remember the silence afterward. That kind of silence that hums in your ears when you know you've gone too far. I left the kitchen shaking, coat still on, knife roll clenched like a lifeline. When I got home to our shared flat, cold, grim little place above a chippy, my flatmate was at the stove. No fanfare, no questions. Just a small frying pan on low heat and 2 fillets of white fish dusted with flour and salt. He didn't look up when I entered, just said, "White fish calms things down." He was right. He seared them gently with a touch of oil and a knob of butter. No smoke, no crusts of pan violence, just soft sizzling and the citrusy sharpness of a halved lemon waiting on the side. A few frozen peas went into a pot with a bit of mint and a pinch of salt. He didn't talk. I didn't either. But in that moment, that pan was the only thing in the flat that made sense. When the fish turned golden at the edges and flaked at the touch, he slid it onto a plate. No garnish, no nonsense. Just the fillet, a squeeze of lemon that hissed as it hit the hot surface, and a spoonful of peas, soft and sweet. We ate it, sitting on the floor. No table, just plates in our laps, and the gentle kind of chewing that comes when you're both tired and humbled. It was quiet, but not awkward. That kind of quiet where everything unnecessary has been dropped. The fish was tender, the peas bright, the lemon cut through the day like truth, through noise. Sometimes I still make that dish after rough days, when the world is too much, or I've said the wrong thing in the wrong tone at the wrong time. I reach for white fish, not salmon, not something clever, just something simple, something that knows how to show up quietly. Because not every meal needs to impress. Some meals just need to help you land again. Good night. That was recipe 4. The 5th recipe tonight is baked potato with cheese and chives. Back when I was living in Leeds, sharing a flat above a corner pub, there was a bloke I knew, quiet type, wiry build, always thinking. He worked front of house in a busy brasserie down the street, but you'd never catch him flustered. His secret, he told me once, was baked potatoes, not just eating them, waiting for them. He had a little routine. Every time something weighed heavy on him, trouble with a manager, a shift that went sideways, family things he never elaborated on, he'd go home, prick a potato, rub it with oil and salt, and slide it into the oven. Then he'd pace, not agitated, just rhythmic, like the walk helped sort the thoughts, while the heat did the same to the potato. He never microwaved them. Good thinking needs an hour, he said. And when the skin was crisp and the inside gave way with the gentlest press, he'd split it open like a book and focus entirely on the toppings. Always simple. Shredded sharp cheddar, a bit of butter, a sprinkle of chives. He never overloaded it. Just enough cheese to melt into the flesh, butter to soften the mood, chives for brightness. Then he'd sit at the kitchen table. No music, no telly, and eat in silence. Not sad silence, not even tired, just sorted, like the heat had leached the weight from the day. He told me once, there's something about a hot potato, you can't rush it, so you don't rush yourself. I've never forgotten that. Now when I need time, not advice, not action, just space, I reach for a potato. I let the oven do what it does best. I pace, or I don't. I think, or I let the thoughts settle like steam. And when the time comes, I split it, dress it, and eat slowly, remembering that some foods aren't for celebration or company, they're just for returning to yourself. Good night. That was recipe 5. The 6th recipe tonight is stir-fried rice with leftover vegetables and a fried egg. This was my solo Friday night ritual for a while, when the week had taken its toll and the walk home felt a little longer. The fridge by then was a quiet place. Half a zucchini, a wilting scallion, a few mushrooms, a lone carrot at the back of the drawer. Nothing impressive on its own, but together, a story, not one you planned, but one you told anyway. The egg was always the punctuation. Soft yolk, runny, a full stop after a week that refused to pause. I never prepped ahead for this dish. That was the point. It was about working with what was already there. Cold rice, always from the day before, ideally two. Fresh rice sticks. Cold rice separates like it knows the rhythm. And if I was lucky, there'd be enough to fill the pan and let the grains dance, not steam. The vegetables went in order of toughness. Onions first, if there were any, then carrots, diced small. Zucchini, mushrooms, the scallion whites, always cut thin, so they'd cook fast, join the heat without protest. I used a wok, if I had one, or just a wide skillet. Oil hot enough to shimmer, not smoke. Garlic, sometimes ginger, always tossed in with the vegetables as a quiet base note. Then the rice, broken up by hand, not fork. No shortcuts here, you had to feel it. Press it gently into the pan, let it sit. That crispness underneath was key. Soy sauce, yes, but sparingly. A drizzle around the edge, so it hit the heat before the rice. Maybe a splash of sesame oil near the end, just to close the loop. I'd push the rice to the side, make room in the center for the egg. Crack it straight into the pan, no bowl, no fuss. Sometimes I'd cover it to steam slightly, sometimes leave it open to crisp the edges. It depended on the mood. The yolk had to stay whole though, always. That was the rule. The yolk broke only when I did, when the fork finally cut through, mixing golden threads through the rice below. The scallion greens went on top, if I had them. If not, nothing. No garnish necessary. This wasn't food for company, it was food for reconnection. A moment alone, quiet except for the clink of the fork against the bowl. I'd eat standing, usually, or curled on the sofa with one leg folded under me, letting the warmth fill the gaps the week had left behind. I still make it sometimes, on nights that feel half forgotten, when the fridge is honest and the hunger asks for something simple but caring. And I always end it the same way. A fried egg on top, yolk waiting, punctuation ready. Good night. That was recipe 6. The 7th recipe tonight is toasty with cheddar and Branston pickle. The first pub I worked in served this at last call. Not fish and chips, not crisps, just toasties, cheddar and Branston pickle. The order never changed. It wasn't written down, and no one announced it. The cook just started pressing them as the clock neared closing. One after another, you'd hear the slow creak of the sandwich press, the gentle hiss of butter on the griddle, and smell the cheese before you saw it. Everyone ordered one. Drunks, barmaids, even the landlord, stoic man, never smiled much, but always had his toasty cut diagonally on a paper napkin. No one explained why they wanted it. They just did. It wasn't hunger exactly. It was ritual, a need, a punctuation at the end of the night's chaos. We used white bread, always, not artisan, not sourdough, just soft, square-cut supermarket white. It crisped better. Took the butter like it meant it. We'd slather the outside of each slice with salted butter, real stuff, none of that oil blend nonsense. So it would toast to a deep gold, almost caramel at the edges. The filling was simple, sharp English cheddar, grated, not sliced, because it melted more evenly and found all the corners. Then a spoonful of Branston pickle spread thin on the inside. Not too much, just enough to cut through the richness, The way vinegar cuts through a foggy head, chunky style was preferred. Bits of carrot and onion softened just right in the heat. We didn't use fancy presses, just a hot flat-top grill with a cast iron weight, set gently on top. Press too hard, and the filling oozes out. Too light, and the bread stays pale. There was a feel to it, like knowing when a record is almost over. You learned by touch, by waiting for the edges to turn crisp, and the middle to give just a little when pressed. The cheese had to bubble, but not burn. The pickle had to warm, not scald. When it was done, we'd lift it off the grill, let it rest for 10 seconds, long enough that the cheese wouldn't tear away from the bread like melted glue. Then slice, corner to corner. Diagonal, always. That was the only flourish allowed. They were eaten leaning against walls, sitting on crate steps in the back alley, or hunched over the bar itself. No one spoke much by then, just chewing and sighing, the occasional God, that's what I needed. And it was. Not a feast, not a show, just warmth, sharpness, and crunch. The flavor of winding down. I still make one when I come home tired, in a way that food can fix. No measuring, no garnish, just cheddar, Branston, and white bread. Browned like the memory of a pub kitchen at 1:45 a.m. And when I take that first bite, it's like I'm back there. Aprons untied, lights low, the hush after the night, and the comfort of something that asks for nothing but to be eaten. Good night. That was recipe 7. Having trouble sleeping. I was once young and ambitious and had many sleepless nights. When I need to fall asleep, I may read, I may have a snack, but I always pull back fond memories to soothe my mind. Never of my restaurant and achieving my Michelin stars, but always of my first week at Hotel St. George, or learning the way to truly cook at the Box Tree. And finally, when I became a man at Le Gavroche. Search for your own memories, forget the troubles awaiting you, and drift off keeping in mind these recipes for sleep. Having trouble sleeping. I was once young and ambitious and had many sleepless nights. When I need to fall asleep, I may read, I may have a snack, but I always pull back fond memories to soothe my mind. Never of my restaurant and achieving my Michelin stars, but always of my first week at Hotel St. George, or learning the way to truly cook at the Box Tree. And finally, when I became a man at Le Gavroche. Search for your own memories, forget the troubles awaiting you, and drift off keeping in mind these recipes for sleep. Having trouble sleeping. I was once young and ambitious and had many sleepless nights. When I need to fall asleep, I may read, I may have a snack, but I always pull back fond memories to soothe my mind. Never of my restaurant and achieving my Michelin stars, but always of my first week at Hotel St. George, or learning the way to truly cook at the Box Tree. And finally, when I became a man at Le Gavroche. Search for your own memories, forget the troubles awaiting you, and drift off keeping in mind these recipes for sleep. having trouble sleeping. I was once young and ambitious and had many sleepless nights. When I need to fall asleep, I may read, I may have a snack, but I always pull back fond memories to soothe my mind. Never of my restaurant and achieving my Michelin stars, but always of my first week at Hotel St. George, or learning the way to truly cook at the Box Tree. And finally, when I became a man at Le Gavroche. Search for your own memories, forget the troubles awaiting you, and drift off keeping in mind these recipes for sleep. having trouble sleeping. I was once young and ambitious and had many sleepless nights. When I need to fall asleep, I may read, I may have a snack, but I always pull back fond memories to soothe my mind. Never of my restaurant and achieving my Michelin stars, but always of my first week at Hotel St. George, or learning the way to truly cook at the Box Tree. And finally, when I became a man at Le Gavroche. Search for your own memories, forget the troubles awaiting you, and drift off keeping in mind these recipes for sleep. Having trouble sleeping. I was once young and ambitious and had many sleepless nights. When I need to fall asleep, I may read, I may have a snack, but I always pull back fond memories to soothe my mind. Never of my restaurant and achieving my Michelin stars, but always of my first week at Hotel St. George, or learning the way to truly cook at the Box Tree. And finally, when I became a man at Le Gavroche. Search for your own memories, forget the troubles awaiting you, and drift off keeping in mind these recipes for sleep. Having trouble sleeping. I was once young and ambitious and had many sleepless nights. When I need to fall asleep, I may read, I may have a snack, but I always pull back fond memories to soothe my mind. Never of my restaurant and achieving my Michelin stars, but always of my first week at Hotel St. George, or learning the way to truly cook at the Box Tree. And finally, when I became a man at Le Gavroche. Search for your own memories, forget the troubles awaiting you, and drift off keeping in mind these recipes for sleep. Having trouble sleeping. I was once young and ambitious and had many sleepless nights. When I need to fall asleep, I may read, I may have a snack, but I always pull back fond memories to soothe my mind. Never of my restaurant and achieving my Michelin stars, but always of my first week at Hotel St. George, or learning the way to truly cook at the Box Tree. And finally, when I became a man at Le Gavroche. Search for your own memories, forget the troubles awaiting you, and drift off keeping in mind these recipes for sleep.